just wanted to show you all a really nice picture of me that was taken recently. Thought I'd put that up there. I like to give that intimidating look. I guess we don't have to wait around anymore. We're good. So the first thing that has to be said is y'all just got here. I know I saw some of you yesterday, but you just got here this morning. And instead of walking around and seeing all the cool stuff, you decided to come in here. That means a lot to me. Thank you so much for coming in. I do have to admit, it's fine. I do have to admit I'm a little intimidated though, because anybody that follows me knows I've been a little occupied for the last 6 or 7 months. And so when I got the call, and I guess I can take, okay, it's not me, it's Stone Cold. I was going to put CJ on the shirt to make it look even more like me, but I've been a little preoccupied for the last few months because my beautiful wife, Lisa, which let's get it out of the way now. Go ahead. Come on. Thank you. I mean, I'm not offended by the fact that every single one of you wishes it was her up here and not me. That's fine. I wish she was up here too, but we finally, there we go. Let's do it. There we go. Okay. Again, technical difficulties. It's my fault, not his. Trust me. So for the last few months, well, actually, we got to go way back. To a couple of months ago, I got a call from Sean Hale, the owner of this show, and he said, "Hey, you're going to do a talk for me, right?" And I'm like, I haven't thought about anything because I like to try to do things a little bit differently than what everybody else does. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to talk about because my beautiful wife, I have to say her name that way, my beautiful wife and I just bought this house. And this is not a talk about my house, but I'm just giving you some examples here of what I had going on. And we bought the house early in the year, and for 3 months, I was going down to this house every weekend. We lived in Virginia. This house is in North Carolina. I was driving down there every single weekend to work on the place because there's 2 buildings on the property, which we can actually talk about because the buildings on our property is it's kind of the star of the show of this talk. But the property had this building here, which is a barn from the early 1900s that was originally a horse barn. And they converted it into a finished space. They did wedding receptions and stuff like that in here. It's really nice. It looks way different now, though, because this is actually full of all of our products that we sell on our website. This is kind of a dream come true for me because before this, Lisa and I were working out of our basement, which was about the size of this stage. And to go from there to something like this was a big deal. This building didn't require a whole lot of work. It was almost ready to go the way you see it in this picture. Run a broom, get the cobwebs out of there, bring the racks in, and it was ready to go. But this next one, however, this building was in need of a little bit more work. This is the one, I don't know what's happening here. No, not that one. I know how to use iPads, I promise. It's, I don't know. You think I haven't done that? Oh boy, here we go. To be honest, the slideshow really isn't important for what we're talking about here today, but oh well. Okay, well, so we can do that one, that's fine. I did include in this slideshow a walkthrough of this particular building. The property has 3 buildings on it, our house, the barn, which we looked at, and then this building here, which this building's fascinating. It used to be an old convenience store, and it actually has a gas pump outside of it, which is still there, which is a real thrill for me. I don't know why I've dreamt of having an old thing like that and an old Coke machine. I don't have the Coke machine yet, but this particular section of the building that I'm in here was a building that was 1.5 miles away from our property, and it was a one-room schoolhouse for years, decades. And they moved it to this property and attached it to the other building and built a new, bigger school in its place. And the interesting thing is, not long after they built the new school, a hurricane came through and took it down to the ground, but this one's still standing. So when Lisa said to me when we were first looking at this house that she picked, by the way, she said, I'm worried in North Carolina gets hurricanes and all of this. And I said, honey, it's been standing for almost 200 years and it's made it through all of that. I don't think we're going to have much of a problem. So that convinced her that it was going to be okay. But this particular area here is what we used for our beta system. We sell live betas. Yes, I say beta. You may say beta. Don't get up and walk out unless your last name is Steenfot. I've said beta my whole life. You're going to hear me say that multiple times here today. If it bothers you, I'm sorry. I can't reprogram my brain. But this is a system that I'm still currently building for my beautiful wife for all of the betas that we sell in here. This entire building we made into our fish house. And I do not see him in the audience, but I have met this gentleman in person. Somebody suggested, because I am such a fan of home improvement and DIY and all of that, and the show This Old House, we should name the building This Old Fish House. So that's what we're actually calling it. Unfortunately, you're going to see a little bit of the fish house, the other side of the fish house in a minute, but the other one wasn't working for whatever reason. But for 3 months, I was going down on the weekends and working on this system. And it was not fun, even though it was my dream to go down there and do that. It's 3.5 hours away from where we were living before. So it was going down there. We actually had tenants living in the house, so I couldn't stay in the house, even though they said I could, which would have been weird. But I was staying in hotels. I was going down there every weekend. Lisa was coming down with me most weekends too. But needless to say, when Sean called me, I was like, listen, I just got done going down there for 3 months straight, every weekend, working on this, getting it ready for us to move. And then I moved, which was the worst experience of my life, which is why I had Stone Cold Steve Austin telling you I don't want to talk about this, because it really is a rough part of my life. But it was a disastrous situation. Even though it was a success, it was horrible. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to get up here and talk about. I mean, what am I supposed to do? I haven't thought about it at all. And then I said, well, maybe I'll just talk about that. So today, we're going to talk about moving aquariums. I'm going to tell you what I went through. And please understand, I ain't asking for anybody's sympathy. I'm a lucky guy to be able to do what I do for a living. I'm a lucky guy that all of these people showed up to help me with this project. And even though I'm in the picture, I wasn't doing much, I promise you. You will see as we move forward, there were a lot of situations where I would have 8 people carrying an aquarium and I'm just kind of following them like, I don't know, like they wouldn't let me do anything. I'm related to most of the people in here. This is my nephew. It doesn't matter. Who cares? I'm related to almost everybody in this picture, but that was a very special thing that they all showed up. And this is moving my 240-gallon tank out of my old house. But what I've done here to talk about this is I put together, hopefully this one plays. Yeah, okay. So all this is going to be, and I'm not going to be offended if you watch this the whole time. I wouldn't want to look at me either, but this is just raw footage that I pulled from my SD card at home of moving footage. I had my daughter and my future son-in-law with 2 cameras just filming everything that they could possibly film. So I don't think there's anything weird in this footage because I did kind of proof it, but if anything weird pops up, I don't know. Don't be offended. But nothing weird happened that day. But it is raw footage. So we'll have to see what happens. But when we talk about moving aquariums, there's really 2 kinds of moves, and one is the easy way. The other is the worst, but it's the one that most people do. When we talk about moving aquariums, the first way of doing it, which I consider would be the easiest way of doing it, and I've done this several times and it was actually very fun, would be what I call the start over method, which is you're living in a house, you're moving over there, you get rid of everything that you have. I know that's hard, but sell all the tanks on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, rehome all of your fish, move, and then start all over again on the other end. That is, without a doubt, the easiest way to do it. We did that in 2017 when I was on my break from all of this. I took my tanks down, we moved, and they sat in our house for like a month and a half before we started getting back into it again. A month and a half was about all I could take, and I had to start getting some glass boxes full of water again. But the reason why this is the easiest way is because you don't have to worry about anything else that we're going to talk about here today. And it's actually, I guess you could say there's two different kinds of start over methods. There's just getting rid of everything, moving, starting over, or just getting rid of all of your fish, which I kind of misspoke earlier. That's what we did when we moved in 2017. We got rid of all of our fish, moved the tanks, and then got new fish. That's equally as fun. We all know, every single person in this room knows, going to the fish store and buying fish is the best part of this whole deal. So if you're doing that and you're starting all over again from scratch, that can be pretty fun. And that's what we did. We didn't get rid of all of our tanks in 2017. And none of this footage is from that, by the way, because I wasn't doing YouTube videos at the time, so I don't have any footage of that. But we got rid of everything, moved them over to the new house, and then started over with the fish. But we didn't have to worry about any fish. We didn't have to worry about any of that, which makes doing that very, very fun. Now, the one thing I would suggest, if you're getting ready to move and you have a bunch of tanks and you choose to do this method, I would say do it a month and a half before you move. Get started very, very early, because it's not exactly easy to rehome fish, especially if you have a bunch of Oscars like I do. It's easy to get rid of betas and discus and African cichlids, but to get rid of Oscars, for some reason, nobody wants them. I don't know why, but getting rid of your fish can be more of a challenge than you might think. So starting early in the process is going to help you out to where you're not having to rush at the last second to get rid of fish. I've actually been there and having to take the fish to the pet store, which is, you never really know what's going to happen then. So it's easier to just get that out of the way and break the tanks down a month and a half earlier. Have everything ready so that when you do move, you're not having to worry about anything except for the glass breaking. That's really the only challenge. But do it soon. Don't wait till the last weekend. Spend that last minute with your fish that you possibly can. Trust me, if you start the process early, you're going to be better off. And actually, in everything that we're going to talk about, starting early in this process is going to be the key to doing it. Now, the second, or I guess third, because I added one, which is not part of my plan, but the other way of moving it is, or moving tanks, is moving everything, which is what we did when we moved from Virginia to North Carolina. And it's what I will never, ever, ever do again, because it is horrible. Now, if you're moving 3 doors down, first of all, don't even talk to me, because that's not even a job. But if you're moving 3.5 hours away, I can't imagine doing it this way again. I mean, it was hard, but if you know anything about me, you know I have a lot of fish that I've had for a long time. And these are fish that I'm attached to the same way I would be with my dogs, with my cats, or should I say Lisa's cats, and everything else. I can't just get rid of them. Plus, if I got rid of them, how many people would revolt that are on my YouTube channel? How dare you get rid of those discus? How dare you get rid of the Oscars and the bikers? That's another one. I say biker. You may say it another way. It doesn't matter. So that way can be pretty difficult to do. But if you're going to do it this way, which is what I did, I want to talk a little bit of detail about how to do that. Wow, I'm getting dry here. Hang on. I've been talking all weekend. This is rough. I don't think I included it, but this one here is my future son-in-law. I just found out that He impregnated my daughter with my third grandchild. But he's awesome, though. I love him. He's really cool. This is something I didn't plan on talking about today, and I don't think there's any footage because it was that tank that we were carrying. We were bringing those tanks up our stairwell in our basement, and it happened right before the picture that I showed you earlier. He was in the front, and everybody said, okay, 1, 2, 3, pick up the tanks. He stood up, and the handrail the handrail that goes up went right into his shoulder. And he's made of steel. I actually made a funny thing about it. In the video that I did about this, I put a Superman costume on him. Isn't that funny? He turns around and smiles right when I said that. His name's Doug, by the way, but that piece went straight into his shoulder, and I thought he broke his collarbone. But he just kind of shook it off and was like, all right, let's go. I don't know how he didn't get hurt, but I don't want to talk about the risk of injury moving aquariums. We all know how dangerous it can be. You're carrying giant. Why did I pick this clip? It's like they're all, like I said, I didn't proof this. I mean, it's like they're listening to me. Look at me. I'm the only one tired. This is like 30 minutes of footage. I didn't go through all of it. But we all know that there is risk of serious injury, not just dropping the aquariums and they shatter and, the carnage that can happen with that, but also how many people could have gotten hurt? That's a 450-pound glass box. How many of them could have gotten seriously hurt? My heart rate starts to go up when I talk about that. We made it through this entire thing unscathed, so I don't want to spend much time talking about that. But this is a dangerous thing. But anyway, this is what happens when you go off track. You completely forget where you were, and let's just wing it. But just like I said with the start over method, if you're gonna do this, there is no amount of planning that's enough. I cannot recommend more. I have been talking about this move for, adjust the aperture, John. I've been talking about this move for over a year. And it was something that I had thought of every single thing. I thought I was completely ready to go. And just like this talk today, nothing went the way I thought it was going to go. So you cannot plan enough, and you cannot start early enough planning this whole process of how you're going to do this. Just some of you may not know our inventory. We have a 360-gallon aquarium, which weighs 750 pounds with nothing in it. We have two 240-gallon tanks. That's a big-looking tank, but that's 125-gallon, and that's my big butt here. But this railing here is what I'm talking about. Doug's shoulder went into this corner. Well, come on, Kent. It's my nephew, but that's where he almost hurt himself. But two 240-gallon tanks that weigh about 450 pounds each, two 125-gallon tanks that Lisa has about 300 pounds of sand in both of them, a bunch of 75s, 90s, nanos. We got a bunch of stuff. So there were some heavy hitters in this move. So I thought I was doing the right thing by starting the plan super early, and it basically never goes the way you expect it. But one of the things that I did do that helped me out a lot in this process is I started going through everything that I have. Every single person in this room, I promise you, and I want you to raise your hands if I'm right. Every single one of you has a can of fish food in your fish cabinet with about that much food in it that's been there for about a year. Yeah, every single one of us. Bob, come on. Every single one of us has done that. We cannot answer the question why we still have that can of fish food or that bottle of Prime that has one drop left, but we can't throw it away. Start going through all that nonsense. Start throwing that stuff away. You know that the SpongeBob pineapple is all faded and you know you're never going to use it again. Throw that away. That light that's in the corner that broke 8 months ago and you're never going to fix it because you don't know how, and neither do I, and it's not worth fixing. Throw it away. Consolidate everything down as much as you possibly can. This is hard for us to do because once we start filling up glass boxes with water, we almost all instantaneously become hoarders. And you all know it. We keep everything, we collect as much as we possibly can. Everything is, no, don't throw that away. We might use it again someday. Get rid of it. Trust me, there is no bigger example of this than me, and even worse is my wife. I cannot tell you when I was getting this stuff ready, how many things I picked up and I'm like, are you serious? Like, what is this? And she's like, I might use that someday. And so it has to go in a tote. But we had so much stuff. Look at these poor guys. They're exhausted. Yeah. Oh, I thought I had much more footage than that. Well, let's just play it again. Why not? Yeah, I kind of screwed the pooch on this one, but I consolidated down as much as I possibly could, got rid of as much as I could. A lot of it I had to do when Lisa wasn't looking, and there was still a ridiculous amount of stuff that had to be moved. And I'm the kind of person, I say to her, if it can go in the attic, it can go into Goodwill, because if we're putting it in the attic, we're never going to see it again, so why do that? But Lisa and all of our kids are complete hoarders, and it's really tough. But if you consolidate things down, quite obviously the reason why you would do that is because that's the less stuff you have to move. That's the less stuff that's going to get lost on the other end. I've got things I still haven't found from our move. So getting rid of all of that stuff is... Anyway, thanks, Will. What's happening? Pardon me while we have technical difficulties. Again, not his fault, it's mine. We did that as much as we could, but then also the other thing I did was about 2 weeks before we even, before moving day came, I started doing things that I could get ready for the move that maybe you wouldn't think that, okay, whatever. You might not think you can do, and if you have like heavily planted tanks, maybe you couldn't do, but I did it because I don't do anything but kill plants. I took off like on that tank and all of my big tanks, took all the lights off of them, packed them up, wrapped them up, get them secured so that that's just one less thing that I have to worry about when moving day comes. Obviously, there are tanks that you can't do that with, but as much as I could, I did the work before moving day came. And that helped, but it was still a total disaster. The earlier you do these things, the less stress you're going to have. And I'm going to tell you, it's going to be stressful. We all know that. If you've moved an aquarium from your family room to your basement, it's a stressful thing. So imagine moving however many tanks 3.5 hours down the road. It's going to be stressful. Anything that you can do to alleviate some of that stress, you're going to appreciate down the road. And the biggest thing is anybody in here planning a move like within the next year? Okay, I feel for you guys. How many tanks do you have? 4? Okay. It's nothing. Take care of that in 2 hours. That's not a big deal. How many do you have? Huh? 3? Oh, come on. Why are you even here? No, you're still going to be stressed, though. I mean, it doesn't matter. You can have 1 nano tank, and it's a stressful thing. The next thing I'm going to say maybe doesn't apply to you two gentlemen, but if you have a lot of aquariums, which most of us do, the best piece of advice that I can give you, and the one thing that I hope you take away from this, is do this on a completely separate move. You're moving twice. I mean, I know not everybody can do this, but if you're able to do this, I promise you, it's going to, what? Oh, that's just me. Okay. That's not in my slideshow. If you can do it this way, I promise you it's going to help a lot. And that's exactly what we did. Now, we're very fortunate. We're self-employed. I have a wife that's easy to deal with as long as she gets what she wants, but we were able to do this, but we had to do it a very special way, not special way, but there's only really one way that we can do this, because if you think about it, you're moving live animals to another place that you're not going to be. So these animals need to be taken care of. They need to be fed. They need water changes. They need all of that. So it's very difficult to do. especially when it's 3.5 hours away. So what we had to do was we had to do the move for the aquariums 2 weeks before our actual move. And we're moving the tanks 3.5 hours away. How are we supposed to take care of these fish while we're 3.5 hours away from it? We don't know anybody in North Carolina. The only people I know down there are the lady at the post office and the lady at the UPS office. Those are the only people we know down there, but we also never leave the house. So I don't know that we ever will know a lot of people down there, but it's not like we had somebody that we could call that we trusted, that we could say, hey, can you go feed our fish a couple times a week, check on them, see what's going on. We didn't have that. So the way we did it was I moved with the fish tanks and our business, our website, all the inventory that we carry. I moved down there with all of that, and I was down there by myself for 2 weeks before we moved everything else. And if we had not done it this way, even though it was very difficult, I was separated from my wife for 2 weeks. Sometimes I would say that's a good thing, but Lisa and I get along like best friends, so that was rough. 2 weeks away from the kids and all that, but there's no other way we could have done it. I mean, the aquariums that we have that we moved took a U-Haul truck, the 26-foot U-Haul truck, which is the biggest one we have, 2 loads. And that sounds extreme. It's like, no, I feel like you could have done better than that. But it's not like you can take my 360, put it in the U-Haul truck, and then bring another tank and put it on top of it. You can't do that. So you have a tank that's the size of this block right here, taking up that much space. And oh, by the way, the stand is the same size. So I'm not going to put the tank up on the stand in the back of the truck. That would be the worst mistake ever. So half the truck is occupied by just one aquarium. So I was shocked by that. I mean, I pulled my tape measure out. I thought I knew, but we were not able to get it all in one trip. We had to do it in 2 trips, which was certainly not fun, and another trip for our business. So again, this brings back so many haunting memories, but there's no way we could have done that and moved our furniture and all of our everything that we have. There's no way we could have done that. So doing them as separate moves, yes, you have the inconvenience of needing to take care of your fish somehow. If you're fortunate and you have somebody that can do it, or if you're only moving 20 miles down the road, you can stop on your way home from work or whatever, that's good. But it doesn't matter if you're doing this 3 miles down the road or 3.5 hours down the road. Do this on a completely separate move where all you're doing is focusing on your aquariums and nothing else. I'm telling you, it's going to be the easiest way to do this. And if you're moving across country, I don't know how you would do that. Somebody came in earlier and said they just moved, where is he from? California to Texas, and moved all of his fish, but moved just the fish. There he is. He moved just his fish and then bought all new tanks on the other end. I lost hair when he told me that. I was like, oh, that sounds so stressful. But most of the fish made it successfully. But if you're able to separate the two, it will definitely help you out all that much, even if you have to be separate from your partner for 2 weeks while you do all of that. And even if it takes 2 26-foot U-Haul trucks to do it. When it comes to moving day, I really don't know how much I need to talk about that. We all know what we have to do. We have to drain the water out. We have to take the fish, put them somewhere, and we have to carry everything. Now, what a lot of people have asked me is, how come you didn't take all of your fish out and drain the tanks prior to the move? Well, it was early May when we did this. Early May in Virginia is usually pretty warm, and in North Carolina, it's definitely warm. But of course, for us, it was not. It was about 40 degrees, and it was drizzling the entire weekend. So there was no doing anything with the fish, really. It had to all be done on the same day. If I could figure out a way to do it separately, that would have definitely helped. But what we ended up doing was the day of the move, I got up at about 6 a.m. and I started taking big totes and putting them in the back of my cargo van, filled those up, not filled them up, but put as much water as I needed in those totes and then put the fish in there. I pulled my van out and I left it running for like 19 hours straight because it was 40 degrees and I wasn't going to put heaters in every tank. I just turned the heater on full blast in the van and let it run the whole day to keep the fish warm. As far as the amount of water that I put in there, I'm not going to torture the fish for this long. The fish were in these totes for probably 18 hours. I put enough in there to where my fish could be upright, especially the big ones. The bikers, they can be in that much water. They don't care. And plecos and things like that. The discus, though, the Oscars, I had it enough to where they were upright. So they weren't being tortured the entire time. And so it was getting the fish out was a challenge for me. If I could do it all over again, I would try to figure out a way to have them out of the tanks and have the tanks drained before the Army showed up to move the tanks. Because that day, the reason why it took us as long as it did was because I had to drain the tanks the same day. So it was basically all of us standing around waiting for the tanks to drain. When you're draining a 360-gallon tank, that takes a while, and we're just kind of standing around doing nothing. So to make more efficient use of the time and to not be doing this until 4 a.m., I would have found a way to get the fish out. But, you know, I'm never doing this again, so it really doesn't matter. But I'm just trying to help you all out. My next move is to the grave. I'm not moving anywhere. I told Lisa, if we are ever moving again, don't even ask me unless we have enough money to pay somebody to move. I'm not touching anything. I'm moving with what I have and nothing else. I mean, it's just too much. And we're not even going to talk about moving all of our other stuff. That was a disaster. So this is something I'm never doing again, but I might be able to help you out a little bit. If you're able to put the fish in something early, that's definitely going to help. And one other thing, fish are not these delicate little things that if one thing is off, they're going to immediately die. I mean, if I was to ask all of you your top 5 most fragile fish, probably every single one of you would put discus on that list. Everybody looks at discus as, oh, they're so hard to keep, they're so fragile. They were fine. I mean, okay, we did have a scare at the very end with them, but they were completely fine throughout this whole move. I could have kept them in that van for probably 3 days, and they would have been fine. I'm not going to do that, and I wouldn't recommend you do either, but they're going to be fine. I mean, these fish are in small bags when they're imported for days and days and days. They're a lot more resilient than you think. Not just the ones that we all know are resilient, like Oscars and things like that. They're all pretty resilient. I realize some of them are more fragile than others, but you know, even our discus were completely fine. If I have enough time, I will tell you about the scare that we had with them. They were the only ones that we got a scare of, but if you can, you have to have your fish in water. The water needs to be clean and it needs to be close to temperature. If they're going to be, a really long time, having an air stone in there is certainly not going to hurt anything. I will tell you, we have hundreds of fish. I had a tote that had 60 yellow labs in it that are all about 3 inches. These are African cichlids. No problems. Not one of them even showed any sign of stress. Another tote that I had, and these are good sized totes, but they're not huge. I think they're 50-gallon totes with about that much water in it. Had 3 full-grown Oscars, 2 full-grown gold Severums, and 2 full-grown bikers. Not full-grown, not even close, but big bikers, about 16 inches each. All in one tote with no air stone, no nothing. Just clean water and the temperature. The temperature was right. So they're not as fragile as you might think. I don't want you to get reckless. I don't want you to put them in this much water, but I think people do kind of overkill this a little bit. We're all guilty of that. We all want to do everything we can possibly do to make it as easy as possible. And if you are able to do that, please do. I mean, it doesn't hurt anything. But if you're not able to do that, I don't want you to panic. I don't want you to be like, well, we can't do it because I can't put an air stone or I can't. They don't need it. They're fine. I mean, they go through much worse things before you ever get them than they will with whenever you're moving or whatever. A lot of them are going to be completely fine in 5-gallon buckets. I can't put a 16-inch biker or a 13-inch Oscar in a 5-gallon bucket. So I had to go with the totes. But if you're keeping small angels, goldfish, smaller things, community fish, 5-gallon bucket's perfectly fine. Trying to get them out of their tanks, getting the tanks drained before your help shows up is the critical thing. That way you're not, I mean, in my case, I did pay a lot of my family members to come out and help because you have to do that these days. And I was happy to do it because I couldn't have done it without it. But it made me feel bad that these guys gave up a Saturday, pretty much the entire day, and most of it, they were just standing around. So as much you can alleviate that, the better, but it is very difficult to do. And on the topic of the people that showed up to help, I don't care if you're moving 3 tanks or 4 or 92 tanks, you're never going to have enough help. And people are busy. People have a lot of Facebook posts to read, and they have all this stuff that they have to do. And you're going to struggle. I mean, maybe you're more popular than me. I don't know. But you're going to struggle to find help. Ask twice as many people as you think you'll need because a lot of them aren't going to be able to show up. Things happen or whatever. Now, I'm very fortunate. Like I said, I had a lot of family members that lived very close by, but was even more fortunate on the North Carolina end. I had to assemble 2 teams. I had my group there in Virginia, which a few of them came down with us, but I had to assemble a completely separate group in North Carolina to help out. If you're moving right down the street, this obviously isn't going to be an issue for you, but with this one it was. And I got to say, this is going to sound unbelievable, and I still don't believe it myself, but I actually had 2 people drive cross country to come and help us on the North Carolina end. They're 2 YouTubers you may have heard of. One of them's Whips World. He's about 6'6" and the strongest human being I've ever met in my life. And he looks like the kind of guy you would kind of turn around and walk away from, but he's the nicest human being I've ever met. He drove from Chicago to North Carolina, Northeast North Carolina, to help me out, which was absolutely unbelievable. I thought that he made an appearance in this footage, but I don't know. The other one was a guy named Eric Furlow from Furlow's Aquatics. They drove up from Florida to North Carolina to help us out, and I still don't know why. I mean, I don't know why these guys would do that. And I told them, I said, listen, I don't want you to do this because I would never do that. Like, I'm trying to be as nice a guy as possible. Bob's a good friend of mine. He lives in Seattle. He can be as nice as possible, which is not easy for him. I'm not driving to Seattle to help him move his aquariums. Like, hey, I'll send somebody $100 and that person will help you, Bob. I ain't coming out there. But those guys were crazy enough to do that. So I got lucky with that. But we also had, my daughter goes to school in North Carolina, and her boyfriend, who is, I called him the Hispanic Steve Rogers, because he looks like a bodybuilder. He's a bodybuilder. He's huge, and he's as strong as Captain America. He was carrying a lot of the tanks on his own, basically on one end, while everybody else was on the other end. I remember those days. I was never that strong, but wow, I was scared of that. But we were carrying, I say we, I was watching, but we had a 75-gallon tank that had about 3 inches of sand in it, and he was carrying it on one end, which 75-gallon tanks aren't terribly heavy, but when you have all that sand in it, they are. And he was carrying it. We had the suction cups, and he was doing this. He was on one end while his brother was on the other end, and he was curling the tank while they were carrying it. I was like, oh, I don't know. So we got very, very lucky that they were willing to come out and help, and people were willing to drive cross country to help out. But I don't anticipate ever being that lucky again. But again, I'm not going to do it ever again. Have more people than you think you could ever need to do this, because these glass boxes are a lot heavier than we think. And most of you, including me, you're not going to drain them out, take all the substrate out, which substrate is some of the heaviest stuff out there, especially when it's wet. We're not going to do that. We're going to leave the substrate in there, and we're going to just move them as is. Well, if I had substrate in that 360 gallon, it would have weighed probably 1,300 pounds. So, you know, that's a little difficult, and you cannot have enough people to move something like that. So having as big of an army put together as possible to help you out. And again, the absolute biggest thing is doing this separate from your move. Even if you have 5 tanks and they're all 50 gallons and smaller, if you do this separate from everything else and you go through the hassle of having to go there and take care of them, I mean, we love our fish anyway. We're willing to do that. If you're able to do that, that is going to be the best possible advice that I can give you. And I don't know if I had any other things. This did not go as planned, of course. Let me make sure I have everything. Yeah. Planning as far ahead, see you later, as far ahead as possible, having as big an army as possible, and doing this separately is definitely going to help. And I had something else, and I don't remember what it is. I'll remember as soon as I go back over there. But this is one of those things that it is a pretty complex situation. It's intimidating. It's scary. But I think what we overlook is those little things. The little things of, I got 2 guys coming over to help me. It's going to be fine. No, you need 4 or 5. I mean, the more the merrier. I mean, if you have people that are willing to be there and just be there, well, that's good for you. I don't know why this happened, and I don't know if you paid attention, but in most of the footage of moving the tanks, I wasn't doing anything. I was just following along, or maybe I would put my hand on the tank, kind of acting like I was helping for the cameras, but I didn't do anything. They took over everything and moved it. I remember now. Thank you. Nano tanks. Lisa has like 18 nano tanks. And nano tanks are the most popular thing going right now. Everybody has them with their fancy aquascapes and all of their plants and all of that. If you've never moved these tanks, you might be like, I don't know about this, but I promise you it's going to be fine. We did this with all 18 of her tanks. We drained the water down to about that far with the fish still in it and moved it just like that. We did that not only on this move, but when we started our fish store back in 2013, I think it was, we had to move 127 tanks over to that store, and that's how we did it with every single one of them. They were 20-gallon tanks. They would have 50 fry in it because we were breeding fish. We would lower the water down about that far, put the lids back on it, and carry it just like that. Yeah, it's heavy. Yes, water's going to slosh around when you're driving, but that is the easiest way to do it. And listen, when you order fish or when you buy fish from the fish store, they came from an importer with about that much water in it. And so if you have their substrate in there and you have all of that and you lower it down and you just carry it, they're going to be fine. We didn't lose a single nano fish throughout this entire process. Draining the tanks down, moving them as is not as hurtful to the fish as you might think. Now, this story almost ends perfectly, but it didn't end perfectly. We did lose 1 fish. Throughout this entire process, we have hundreds, and we haven't even talked about the hundreds of betas that we have that we sell on our website. Those all had to be moved too, but they're in small tanks. It was no big deal. Not really worth talking about. But through this whole thing with 12 discus, all these big fish, 60 yellow labs, like 30 big African cichlids, peacocks, and haps, we lost 1 fish, and it was a rummy-nosed tetra. I love rummy-nosed tetras. If you know anything about me, they're one of my favorite community fish. It made me sad, but I was like, it wasn't the discus. Because they were in the tank with the discus. And I'll try to go as quick as possible. George is already here ready to get ready. But the only scare we had through the whole thing, except for when Doug almost hurt himself, was we're all at my new place. A lot of the people had to go back to Virginia, but I'm there with Furlough and Whip's World and Furlough's friend Eddie, who also came from Florida to help. We're all there. It's like 3:30 in the morning. It's time to put the discus in the tank, and they're the last ones that we have to do. So the tank or the tub had about this much water in it when we transported them, but we couldn't pick the tote up with that much water in it because it would have just blown up. So we drained the water down, and yeah, the discus had to go kind of down on their side a little bit, but it was just to carry them from my van into the fish house and then net them and put them up into the tank. Well, we did this as fast as we possibly could. We carried them all in. They were down on their side. They were obviously not happy. So I scoop them up and I put them in the tank, and I'm like, whoo! And I look at the tank and they're all still sideways. And I'm thinking, I know you're going to look at me badly with this, but I'm like, of all the fish we have, it's going to be Lisa's discus that are going to not survive this trip. Like, I would have rathered it. I know this sounds bad, but I would have rathered it been anything else but her discus, because she wasn't there. She had to go back up. And oh, by the way, this was Mother's Day. She had to go back up to Virginia. So she wasn't even there. And I'm like, I'm going to have to message her and tell her all of her discus died. This is absolutely insane. I don't know what it was. What our theory is, because it was cold outside, because they had been in there all day long, lowering the water down like that obviously took some of the oxygen out of it. We brought them in, and somebody said maybe it was like the barometric pressure or something like that from the water. I don't know all the science. I don't know what it was, but they were not happy at that last little bit there. I'm panicking. I know what to do, but I didn't know what to do. But fortunately, I have a warehouse on my property that's full of aquarium supplies. I ran down there 3:30 in the morning. Yes, my big butt ran. And I grabbed a tidal filter. I'm not doing an advertisement. I'm just telling you the story. I grabbed a tidal filter out of the box, ripped it out, put it on that tank to get more water moving. And it took about 45 minutes, and they were finally all upright, and they all survived the trip. I went out to the fish house about 6 times throughout the night to check on them. And it took a while, but the next morning, everything was completely fine, and they were eating. And I actually debated whether I was even going to tell Lisa about it or not. But I did tell her. I didn't tell her until I knew they were fine. Plus, it was the middle of the night, so she wouldn't have known anyway. But that was really the only scare we had. And unfortunately, one of the rummy-nosed tetras that are in the tank with the discus didn't make it. But if you have hundreds of fish and you have to lose one, I guess I was okay with it being one of those. Certainly not one of Lisa's discus. But anyway, I ramble way too much. I thought I was going to be able to do a little bit of Q&A, but we're running out of time here. We got to get things transferred over to George. But I do have here, my good friend Alexander back there gave me a bunch of Aquarium raffle tickets. Anybody that's here, this is how many I have. So it's kind of a first come, first served thing. Anybody that wants to come, I can give you a sheet of these, and hopefully you can win something. So thank you all so much for coming out.